Hello, this is David Swank of the D-Swank channel, here for our, what is this, episode 4 or 5 of the Not Magrathea podcast, podcast on creative world building, and joining me, as always, is...
John, the Fuzzy Gamer. How y'all doing?
And today we're going to be talking about magic in your setting. It's in Fuzz's area. It's probably going to be less significant since you are bringing in the DM perspective. But that doesn't mean... D&D has some interesting things on the rules of magic and how it plays. One of the settings, I think Dark Sun, has some very interesting plays in how magic functions in that setting. So, where do we want to start?
Well, there is that lovely topic which we kind of talked on before, and we could go ahead and recap between hard and soft and why it doesn't matter.
Okay. So, obviously, hard magic typically has a set rule system. This is how it works. And D&D is kind of a hard magic system. Because you have a set number of spells you can cast a day, exactly spelled out in rules what the spells do, things of that nature. Soft magic, I would definitely say the magic in Lord of the Rings is soft. Would you say that the Force is soft magic?
Probably, but probably not anymore, thanks to midichlorians.
Fair enough. Do you have any other examples of hard and soft?
In the video that you and I discussed, I think Avatar Last Airbender was brought up as a hard system, since there was legitimate techniques and whatnot that had to be performed for the magic to work.
Okay. What about Harry Potter? You remember? I think that one was brought up in the video. But
probably.
I'm kind of leaning towards a hard system because you have set rules, you have specific pronunciations for the spell. Yeah. You have a school that actually teaches you how the spells work, things of that nature, so that there is a harder system on it. So, it is very much what your story needs. If you want to keep the magic to be mysterious, go with a soft setting, or a soft rule set. If you want, if you have an industrial world and people have done a lot of science, they're going to science the snot out of magic. So they're going to have more rules and understand it better. So, yeah. Rough kind of way to look into it. So, I guess from there we could look at... because depending on whether it's a hard magic or a soft magic, it would also affect how the world develops.
Absolutely.
So, one of my big things that I enjoy is taking magic and technology and just putting them together. I think Fuzz has seen it in a lot of the D&D games that I've run, and in some of the stories that I have written. So, in that, there's a lot of navel-gazing as to what is magic. I mean, is it an alternate energy? You can get as deep as you want to where magic is a fundamental force of the universe, like gravity, magnetism, strong and weak forces. I mean, those are fundamental forces, or forces greater than just like electrons and protons and neutrons for the construction of our universe. So you could have magic down on that level, or it could be something much softer, like, well, one of the gods has given it to you, or you have figured out how to tap into Gaia, or whatever. And depending on where the source of the magic for your society comes from could change a lot, because if it's a fundamental force, and your society is far enough advanced, it's going to drastically affect the appearance of technology and the societies around them.
Right. Why have cars and airplanes when everybody and their cousin can teleport to the next city over?
Right.
Why have guns when everybody can shoot a fireball?
Yep. So that's an important one, is this: if it's a fundamental force, is there a limiting factor on who can use it? Or is it open to everybody, they just have to be trained in it, they have to be made aware? That is a interesting balance point, and something that on my end, when I'm doing the technology and magic mashup, I always have a limit on who can use magic, because you then have a driving force of technology, because suddenly you have a reason for people who are, lack of a better word, mundane, to be able to, a reason for them to develop a gun. Because I can't shoot a fireball. I can shoot a piece of lead very fast over there, though. So, who can touch magic or use it is very important. Again, that's, for Fuzz's perspective on D&D, is a little more interesting in the fact, or it's a little less of an important aspect, because, well, you have your classes. Now, granted, I don't know if you've ever thought about saying my D&D world is a high magic, low magic, medium magic. Wizards are incredibly rare sort of setting.
I think the way it stands, it is kind of low to medium. It's just that y'all happen to be riding in that high magic zone. But then again, you also have the aspect to where you have a background force wanting to completely get rid of magic. And that's actually starting to happen in my world.
Yep.
Talking about how magic affects the world around you and whatnot, one of my favorite examples, and one of the very few book series I've ever read, the Dresden Files, and I think we spoke about that before, is magic having an incredibly adverse effect on electronics. And that could be a real fun example of how important magic is to the world and how it affects it.
Yeah. I don't know how old the Dresden Files is. I remember there being a TV show based on it. I never sat down and read the book series. I kind of regret not getting around to it. But a similar example is from a isometric RPG from early 2000s called Arcanium of Steamwork and Magic Obscura. In that, you have a steam engine. Characters who have a very high magic rating are actually refused entrance on the train. If you have a low magic rating, you can go pretty much anywhere on the train. If you have a medium magic rating, you're pretty much either stuck on the caboose or in the livestock car at the back of the train. Because the engine won't work the more magic you have and the closer you are to the engine. So, a similar thing, that the idea is that magic is a twisting or breaking of the natural laws, and technology relies on the natural laws to function, so if you break one, the other doesn't work. Is that kind of how the Dresden Files kind of explain it?
I don't think so. I don't remember exactly, but it had this issue with disrupting electrical flow.
Okay, so magic being a form of energy, EMP sort of... Okay.
Right, and that's the reason why he drove around in a very old, very basic Jeep.
Okay. So, I guess if you want to have kind of your hidden world or what have you, having magic disrupt technology would be a reason why your hidden world would stay hidden. Especially if everything is limited. So we've talked about how the magic affects the world somewhat. One of the things that I kind of include in magic to some extent is, well, the Green Lantern's ring, where you use your mind and you project. You could say that's technology, but again, we're saying, Arthur Clarke, sufficiently advanced technology, indistinguishable from magic. But Full Metal Alchemist, the alchemy in that is definitely a form of magic, and there is not too many spoilers, but there is a big price on and how that can hurt the world.
Oh,
yeah. In that, so yeah, Full Metal Alchemist. It's if you haven't seen it, go see it. If you have seen it, you know exactly what we're talking about. Then you have, well, pretty much any superpower could be argued as magic. But you have Avatar and that group, or that universe's stuff, and the fact that the spirits get pissed off at the Benders quite a bit in that series. And I don't really think that the Avatar, or the characters in Avatar are... what would be the right word? That their power is given to them through their birth, and it's kind of an internal power, where it's not like it was gifted to them by a patron or a deity or what have you. Granted, it's been years since I've watched Avatar, so I could be wrong there. But that does bring us into kind of the next bit on magic, which is the different types of magic. Not the sources, because you could say divine and arcane are types of magic. Those are our sources, and we'll get to that in a bit. But types of magic. Let's see. You have your projection, or non, I guess, like, non-organic works for a fireball example, but it's not a direct attack on something or a manipulation on something. So, throwing a fireball, raising a wall of stone, it's kind of an action on the physical world. And those are probably some of the most common, most seen. I mean, you have it in everything from Naruto and the jutsus that the ninjas do to straight up D&D. I mean, you have, like, Wall of Fire. Let's see. You want to cover the next section? Or next sub-piece?
The organic and the physical?
Yeah.
The example we brought up was charm. How it physically affects a person directly and not from some outer source. That one, the physical or organic magic, that's a little more difficult, to be honest. What I'm thinking about is body horror happening.
Yep.
Something that changes your internal workings to make you go berserk or something.
D&D has the Cancer Mage.
Physical magic, organic magic. It feels like that would technically fall under the same category as before, because organic magic can physically alter the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we're thinking more like, instead of there's a difference between the showy magic, the fireballs and things like that, and a charm, which, I mean, that's mind altering.
Right.
That's, I mean, you can throw a charm on. Go ahead.
Maybe instead you would have the difference between the physical and the metaphysical.
Yeah. Because I would include in that things like, I mean, if your world has it, astral projection. I mean, Doctor Strange does that quite a bit. You have, in all sorts of anime that has magic in it, the ability to cause, like, a shadow realm or a dimension just a step off of the real world, where, like, two groups, they encounter each other, they best throw down and fight. Let's create a duplicate of our area so we stay hidden. They fight. When the duplicate of the area when the fight's over and the duplicate disappears, it's like they aren't there. The destruction's gone. It's a convenient plot device to keep everything hidden. But, I mean, it is a type of magic. Right. Teleportation. I mean, yeah, it all can affect the world. It's just, it's not a direct effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sort of.
And the last one we're kind of putting down was placed magic. And that's going to be things like inscribing runes, scrolls, enchanted items, cursed items, Fuzz's favorite thing, which is blurst items. But
Pretty much, can the magic I am using for my body be transferred to an object, and it remain there until used?
right.
To some degree.
So now that we've kind of roughly gone over that, I would say that the a lot of times in stories you don't see a lot of enchantments, scrolls, that sort of thing that are like magic scrolls. There might be a technique scroll like in Naruto or Avatar, but the scroll isn't like I read it and through reading it I can cast Fireball.
It's funny though. I think runes probably get used more than scrolls do in a lot of media.
Yeah.
Either in physical rune stones or just runes or any sort of written scripture like in a wall, like in a glyph or something. All those will probably fall under the same category. That does get used a lot, and one could argue that scrolls are just another type of rune.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And you can make physical locations like teleport pads in D&D. And, I mean, they're all over fiction. Teleporters in Star Trek.
Right.
So those work. I know in something I really liked in... what was it? Oh, the Aragon series. When mages were fighting, they actually tried to touch each other with their magic. And you could, like, burn the other one by touching them with their magic. So it was always this kind of defense-offense combined sort of thing. While you're throwing magic, you're trying to steal their magic and all sorts of things like that. It was one of the things that I really liked about that setting. And things like a charm spell was a lot harder to put on someone because you actually had to reach them with your magic, like a metaphysical reach out with this power from within you and have the power touch them instead of I looked at you and suddenly you're charmed. Not really the succubus setup. So, I guess we're on to sources of magic at this point.
Looks like it.
So,
sources can be fun.
Yes. The three sources that we brought up kind of encompass them all, but they are heavily influenced by D&D because of the way D&D divides it up, and it just works. Divine and Arcane and Psionic. And you could say that Psionic isn't really magic, but it's close enough, and a lot of people who play games that have Arcane and Psionic in them, they have a transparency between them. So, you want to give a brief description of what the differences between them are?
Well, Divine and Psionic is easy enough. Divine being it coming from some deity, some patron, some god of sorts. Psionic is a psychic thing. It's about the mental process, controlling things with your brain. Arcane I've never fully understood. What is Arcane? What makes Arcane Arcane?
Well,
innate? Something that just is?
I believe... Let me double check. The definition of arcane is understood by few, mysterious or secret. So,
but we don't know where it came from. It's just
yeah,
there.
Yeah. Nobody. Yeah, you don't really understand. Only a few people really understand it. So your wizards, your sorcerers. It is a source of power. And I guess it would. The way we're kind of using it is all magic that doesn't fall into divine, so being given to you, or the source in that it is a psychic manifestation. So it is a way of using a power that... Go ahead.
So really what you got here, what you got here is a general source of power, source of energy, that's going through one of three filters.
Yes.
Because it almost sounds like that divine can be arcane, it's just filtering through a god upon which you got it from.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you have things like alchemy.
Right.
Which in reality is just an early form of science, which had some divine stuff mixed in with it early on because,
yeah.
History and all that.
I mean, the church wants gold. It has a bunch of lead. Let's make some gold out of it.
Yeah, and this goes back to what you're saying with Clark. Alchemy can be seen as a magic if you don't understand how it was made.
Right.
But in those early days, they also legitimately thought that they were imbuing their god or whoever's god's power into those elements, into those chemicals.
Right. And
I remember...
Oh, I was just going to tie that back in that early alchemists, chemists, whatever you want to call them, looked at the four elements, fire, earth, water, air, that sounds familiar, as how things were made. So, like trees, their hardness came from earth. The leaves and the sap inside them was evidence of water. And it wouldn't burn unless it had fire within it. So trees had three of the four elements in their structure.
Yep, and you add a little bit of modern day science and you can find air.
Yep.
But what I was going to bring up is the early methods in which their processes were. I remember reading about alchemy early on when I had some interest in it. And there were like certain times of days when they had to get up in their routine to do something very specific at very specific times and be praying over their experiment while they're doing it. So that's something you could do with your alchemy in your world, is have a legitimate divine connection to it, and it be strictly through the mixing of chemicals.
Early chemists or herbalists or whatever, one of the items that they used was a copper bowl and pestle. Copper mortar and pestle. And that's how they created the salves that were put on like wounds and things like that. And fairly recently, actually, we've discovered that copper is a natural antibiotic. Hence why you see all those ads on TV about copper this or that or whatever you can strap on your elbow and suddenly feel like you're 20 years old.
Yeah, I know. But I will tell you something that has leaked into my life from way back from when I was a kid in this particular circle. It was not unusual if you had a wound to have a real copper penny placed within the bandage. that was a thing.
Yep. So, copper has always had kind of this mythical level of healing to it, but after we did some science at it, we discovered it's just one of the chemical properties that the element had. So, let's see. So we talked about alchemy. I guess still you were talking about kind of the traditional alchemy. You had the Full Metal Alchemist alchemy, and the power, I guess, those are you could view those two different ways. Like, Full Metal Alchemist, they trained themselves. And I'm not 100% sure, but it seemed like the power was within them to perform the alchemy. It wasn't like they were calling on someone else to do it.
I don't recall. I don't remember either.
But that ties in as well. Is your magic from external or internal source? That's another way you can divide it up. Most divine, if it's filtered through your gods or patron, that's a gift. It's external. It's gained externally. Usually, psionics or arcane come from internal. A lot of arcane backgrounds come from demons or dragons or fae. There we go. Brain just stopped. But those are a lot of the sources for magic. So, and one of the last bits in here is how important is magic to the story or world you're presenting.
The world I'm building, pretty darn important.
For mine, pretty important because it's Magitech.
Yeah.
However, honestly, if you look at Lord of the Rings, magic isn't all that important except for the fact that they're fighting, in essence, a god. The ring is, he's a lich. Or a godly lich. And, yeah. Or maybe he's a chief minion of one of the gods. I don't remember. But,
right.
Yeah, you really only have, the point of the problem is magic based. But everything else is, for the most part, much more physical, much more mundane. So, it really varies. So, I guess we could touch on a couple of things now that we would bring up in later ones, like when we start talking about technology and era, because that all fits together with magic. There is a thing. There was a guy on the Giant in the Playgrounds forum called Emperor Tippy, and there's this meta concept called the Tippyverse, and it makes a lot of sense, but it's using magic and the rules of D&D, and in essence, how would a world like that develop? You could have people that craft golems, and there's a specific type of golem in D&D, like shade steel golems. They're invisible, or can be invisible, and they can release pulses that give people negative levels. And you could have those as your police force because they're golems and they follow orders. You just have a few specific people are your lieutenants or your commanders in your police force, and they run around with a cadre of shade steel golems to arrest people or put them down if need be. You have permanent teleportation ring or circles of teleportation to get you around a city, and persistent create food and water traps. So you could use magic and really affect the city and the era. And then a city like that's going to have government, which is very magic-based. So, a magocracy. And those are all things that we'll delve deeper in later episodes. So, anything to add on those points?
Not yet. I don't believe so.
Okay. So, I guess at this point, we're going to move on and talk about our worlds that we're building. So, since I've been talking quite a lot, I'm going to take a break and let Fuzz go first.
Okay. Well, the magic of my world being basically the D&D campaign world of sorts, it will have a pretty strong basis in that. But what I'd already decided is that magic is going to have a very, very strong presence in the world because the very core of that world is raw magic. And it is such a raw force that it distorts everything around it. So, as we've talked about before, my world has cracked open, and the raw magic is seeping out, which has caused the ultra-rich to move to floating cities, floating islands. I think that would basically make mine an innate part of the world, and mostly arcane. Though one could assume that if it's a living beast, which I think is a thing in mine, could also be considered divine. But I think it just being a filter of all arcane is probably going to make more sense. So that's kind of what I'm riding with at the moment. That being said, the people who get magic, they're still going to believe it comes from one place or another. I mean, so yeah, your magic may be technically arcane, but because you have this high belief in Oberon, let's say, you may think that power comes from him. Thus makes it divine. But it's magic is very much a bad thing in this world because of its raw effect on everything around it. That's kind of interesting, I think.
Okay.
So how about your magic take?
Well, what I was leaning towards, and it's something that I use in quite a few of my stories, but I have 3 points that are important for magic to use, and this is arcane magic. Your raw, how much energy you can channel through you, how much you have in you, whatever that is. Your knowledge of what you're trying to do, and your time available. Okay? So, say you're a fairly weak caster. You don't have many spells that you know. You can't cast any big flashy ones quickly. However, you spent your time learning... oh god, that is terrifying. Let's get Georgie back here for a moment. But, you learn, say, how storms work. You know, the whole cycle of water on the ground evaporates, goes up high, cools, turns into clouds, condenses on particulate, falls down as rain. You get enough heat and movement and friction going, you get lightning. If you studied that and knew how it worked, and what you were wanting to do from that, it might take you a day or two, but you could, a fairly weak wizard, knowing how storms work, could summon a storm. Or lightning storm, tornado, what have you. It's not immediate, but by knowing how the physical laws work, they can... it's cheaper for them to make the spell function. So, say you're, instead of summoning a storm, you're throwing a fireball. If you know through science the ideal oxygen, fire, hydrogen mixture for fire, when you cast the fireball, you can cast it. It uses less mana, because you're not so much just forcing a fire, you're actually using the environment to make the fire better. Did that explanation make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I have... most of the magic in the setting works like that. Excuse me.
Cat dander going through the mic.
Yeah, let's say that. But then there's a few people that are going to be, in essence, the Joan of Arc proxies that are touched by a divine influence. And, yeah, that they have a power, a magic that doesn't make sense. While the others are limited by the natural laws, it can outright break the natural laws. So, yeah, that's kind of... there's very few of the divine casters in the story. And they might just be people that have some sort of innate knowledge or talent that they don't realize, and they just are able to really twist the natural laws more than people realized. But a lot of the magic ties into the tech sort of stuff. It's going to be much more like magic-powered Gundam suits with energy swords, arcane energy swords, things of that nature. So, a lot more, I'm going to be able to talk a lot more about it when we hit tech, because if I go too far into it now, I won't have anything to talk about next time. So,
I think one of the things I could have touched on in the way the magic affects the world on my end because you have floating cities, floating islands, there may be a fear that if you are too strong of a magic user or been touched by or exposed to raw magic, it could affect the island.
Ooh.
Make it plummet. So I could see very easily magic being outlawed in those cities.
Yeah. One of my stories, and not the one that I'm doing for this, but I'm actually taking a piece out of Dark Sands, or whatever the D&D setting is, but the casters, the magic casters, don't have the innate magic inside them. They're pulling it from what's around them.
Right.
And so, like, you might not think a stone has a lot of magic in them, but, like, hold the stone, draw the magic out of the stone to cast the fireball, and the stone turns into that really fine, the silt that's on the side of the highways. It's that really fine dust. So you basically break something down by pulling the energy out of it to cast a spell. And in the D&D setting, the world is pretty much a desert because arcane casters have used almost the entire world's power to cast their spells. So, impact on the world there.
Just a little bit.
So, I think that covers pretty much everything except our joint world that we were discussing.
Yeah. I think I have probably spearheaded that a little more in these past couple than you have, so if you want to take away on something with that one, go ahead.
Well, I was kind of leaning towards, and I know we may have set this up differently, but I was thinking like the hidden world, the dark world, if we will.
Right.
That one's more magic-based.
Right. And
the other one is tech-based.
Mm-hmm.
So the magic-based, that's the one with the Fae. The Fae gods on that side, if I remember our previous discussion.
Right.
And I was thinking that I kind of like the magic on that side to be more of a soft magic, a break the rules. The fairy's not afraid of you shooting them because you may not realize it, but they've already turned your gun into one of those pop guns with the little stick that pops out and says bang.
Yes.
And you don't know that they've done it because that's the kind of power they wield. But because of that kind of power they wield, the other world is kind of an anathema to them. They don't exist well in it because the other world is much more rules-based. Right. So any magic that exists on that side is very hard magic. Now, this is a very narrative idea. It wouldn't work too well if you were using this setting for a D&D game.
No.
But I kind of like the idea of soft magic on one side where they can do whatever the hell they want. And that makes them even more dangerous to the people from the other side, that everything is rules-based, because they can change the rules.
Right.
So, I kind of like that. It feels fun to me.
It feels fun. Also, it can show the versus aspect of the hard and soft magics right there in the story.
Yeah.
And I do feel like that if you're going to have that soft magic in there, pull a little bit from the previous discussion of Dresden Files, is if the soft magic does go off in the techie world and the light world, or whatever you want to call it, major disruptions.
Yep.
Like EMP blast going off.
Yeah, but it would have to be an extremely powerful, because the amount of tech over there just, it kind of has an inverse effect on them, that there's so much tech there that their power is weakened significantly.
Yes.
Because the world
over...
Yeah, just the world over there relies too much on the physical laws.
Right. Let's say that could affect how both worlds feel about each other.
Yeah.
Your general citizenry won't know that about the people coming over here visiting. So
yeah.
There's always going to be that fear.
Ooh, yeah. And that could really make some interesting story elements. Excuse me. Like, imagine a physics world or science world mob boss, and he's new. He's rubbed out some of his competition, and he's got some other competition in the dark world. So he sends people over to try and rub them out, but it doesn't work because the reality is so different. We've almost got this Toontown dynamic.
Just about. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I love that. I guess there's one major touch of magic, and I hadn't thought of this until just now, that we haven't really broached that much, and that's summoning. Specifically, the trope level summoning of, like, summoned from another world. You're in a fantasy world. That's magic, however you're summoned. Whether it was you get thrown past a god and reincarnated, you're actually summoned here through a summoning circle, what have you.
Right.
I really liked how, of all things, reincarnated as a slime handled summoning people. The anime hasn't really gotten there yet. Well, it's touched the subject, but it hasn't fully embraced the subject yet. And I'm not going to go into that because it's some fairly big plot points and spoilers and things like that. But if you're curious, go ahead and read the light novel, and it lets you know. But, I mean, it has an effect on, well, from what we've been given in the anime so far, it's clear that summoned people are like strategic weapons for nations.
Okay.
So, kind of like nuclear weapons. They have insane powers. Sparse, one of the people in our Discord chat in the Court of Fools, he pointed me at this hilarious new manga, and I can't remember the damn name. Killer Shark in Another World. It's only got 6 chapters out so far.
Wait, Killer Shark in Another World?
Yes. You have this girl. She's everybody hates her because she's weak. She doesn't have much magical ability. She's at the magic school. She's told this is her last chance because the Demon Lord's army is kicking everybody's butt, and they don't have time to waste on somebody at her level. She's better off going home and working on the farm because it's better for the war effort if she's doing that than fighting, because she's going to be slowing everybody else down. So she does her summons, and she gets a shark, a baby shark. And it's really cute looking, and people start making fun of her, and she's all upset. And then some of the people in the class start, like, okay, we've wasted enough time on her. Come on, babe. And, like, they're kissing and being lovey-dovey. And the shark's ability, which is Normie Hater, activates. And it just tears apart the entire class. It turns into a 3-headed shark with tentacles. It's like a squid shark with... and they end up fighting a Demon Lord General that's basically a harpy. And it absorbs the harpy's magic to fight the harpy and attacks it with a Sharknado. It's fantastic.
I may have to go find that one.
I'll shoot you a link to it.
Alright. I don't know if... I just kind of thought about this while you explained that. I don't know if we've touched on it. And there goes the cat.
Yep.
Where would magics that have physical components, like in D&D where you have like actual material components to cast said magic, where would that actually fall in magic systems? They have a lot of them that don't require anything but vocals, or it just happens.
Yeah. Well, in D&D you have vocal, somatic, and material. Somatic is...
Jutsu.
Yeah, or Doctor Strange with his...
Yeah.
And I guess with Harry Potter, it's the flick and swish and flick.
Yeah.
I guess it varies. Some of it ties back to ritualistics and your early alchemy. In my setting, and I thank you for bringing this up, this is where my setting, despite having hard magic, what I classify as hard magic, is somewhat leans into the soft. Because if you as a caster need some verbal mnemonic to help you remember the right ratio of elements to make the perfect fireball, you say those words. If you're having to do something with your hands to help you count or whatever, there's your somatics. So that's in my setting, but usually those are just, those are kind of rituals held over, and both in D&D, both divine and arcane both have those components. So, from my perspective, I see that as more of a fluff, an enhancement to the magics, and less of a necessity.
Yeah.
It does help depending on how you want your magic flavored. It can help on that front. Like if you want your magics to have a much closer tie to nature, you have natural things. If you want like deep earth and the magics come from Gaia or the soul of the planet, using crystals and minerals and things of that nature as your material component, it helps with the fluff. That's how I see it. I didn't know if you saw it any different.
See it both ways, really.
Okay.
I mean, I like the idea that certain powerful magics require something more to focus it, like, kind of like Full Metal Alchemist, you needing an equivalent exchange, something of equal value. But in that particular instance, it would be probably something tied to its arcane roots. Cat, don't you dare. Like the tail of a black cat to cast darkness? But anyway, I mean, I kind of like it. Like, from a mechanical standpoint, there are a lot of spells that require the, which one's the hand movements? Somatic?
Yeah.
If you can't move your hands, you can't cast it. The same could be similar for those material components. If you can't reach your hand into your bag and pull out the component to cast it, it ain't casting. So, I don't really see it as fluff. I mean, yeah, from a DM's perspective, obviously you go with what you go, but from a narrative story perspective, I really like the aspect of those components having a major play.
So, I guess the way the magic system that I have built that ties into a lot of stories that I have, the material component is the arcane energy that is surrounding you.
Right.
And that, the cost, or the equivalent exchange, the cost, what have you, is that rock turning into that fine silt. The entropy, as you could say it. So, but I mean, yes, I agree that there needs, that narratively having something that is required for casting, so it's not just fireball, 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 but also having a pinch of bat guano to shoot a fireball doesn't really make sense to me either.
No, they don't.
So,
if it's sulfur, maybe.
Well, I think bat guano was needed to make saltpeter.
Oh.
So I think that's where it came from. So, but yeah, I guess I kind of roll the material components into another aspect. And even in D&D, material components are not all that necessary, because one of my favorite feats for any caster is eschew materials. I don't have to worry about that crap.
Right.
So, there's that. I think we've covered pretty much everything at this point.
Looks like it.
Let's see if I run to my channel. Videos. Mute. No comments. So. Alright, no comments, no questions. So, I guess next time we're going to be discussing technology, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And I guess era also ties into that. So, like, bronze, brass, things of that nature. Dark Ages, Middle Ages, Renaissance. So, there's a lot in that, just in time frame and history aspects of our world to use as a reference for that. And that's something I cannot express or say more, is why reinvent the wheel? Always look at the real world and what has happened already. So, with that, I guess we're going to sign off. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Until then, bye-bye.
Good. Oh, wait.
Oh.
Before we actually sign off, have you, by the time this posts, posted the first episode of your D&D game?
Not yet. This is going to be a lot easier to render out, and I'm probably going to be rendering the D&D tomorrow or the day after this gets put up, so
look forward to that.
Yep. I hope everybody enjoys that as well. So, until then, bye.